Hello and welcome to another edition of View from the Bridge. Delighted today to be joined by someone a little bit different from cricket analytics side of you, James Maby. Great to have you on. Got so many questions I want to ask you today. First of all, though, tell me a bit about yourself, what you do, your company you work for, so everyone who's listening and watching today can
Yes,
get
so
to
I'm a cricket performance analyst, and that's quite a broad job title for what I do. I've spent 5 years in county cricket. I started at Northamptonshire in 2022, and then went to Warwickshire for a couple of seasons. And now I work with a company called Intelligent Cricket, and we work with teams in county cricket, but also franchise cricket. And I've just come back from the Pakistan Super League working with Islamabad United.
Well, and Notts fans will obviously know Imad Wasim. He was there with you. What was he like as a character?
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, he's just so skillful. And yeah, just he knows exactly what he wants to do, and his kind of understanding the game is so high, and just the way that he talks about the game, so intricate. But yeah, no, great to work with, good personality to have.
He used to bowl the power play for us actually.
He still does, and he's still very effective. And the way that he bowls, because of the way that he releases the ball, he still keeps the seam pretty straight, so that's why he can get swing. But yeah, no, he's still so effective as an option, and we actually bowled him in the first over in the majority of our games. Really useful as a T20 bowler, and still got it.
And that's good to hear. He was popular. I think it was a quarter final against Leicestershire. We ended up tying in the end. We got two off the last ball to get us through. That was the second year we won it. So no, really popular guy here. So great to see you working with him. Actually, it's interesting you mentioned that. Sorry, we're getting a bit off topic
No, go
already.
for it.
You mentioned spinners with obviously a straighter seam and moving it. AJS Patel noticed when he played Notts against Notts for Leicestershire last game, he got Ben Duckett out with one like that. Actually, is
Yeah,
that
it's
not a trend? Is it?
yeah, I think especially in T20, spinners are realizing that they can't just bowl in those middle overs, and their value and a as a player in a team to be able to bowl an over of power play spin is so useful. And it's someone like Imad is that's his super strength. But there are lots of other bowlers that are similar to him, like Il Hussain from West Indies. Just having that ability to be able to control the seam, to keep it straight, to swing it in the power play means that you, especially because the pitches, well, a lot of them in Pakistan didn't turn in the first couple of overs. So it means that you've got a different level of threat in that sort of sense. Um, and yeah, I think a lot of, I suppose we're now in the T20 era of kind of mystery spin. And what that really means is that they've just got lots of different variations, but ultimately batters will plan against them. So someone like Gazanfar, who was at Derby last
Hmm.
year, the way that we would talk about him is he's basically trying to get the ball into the right hander, and the seam might be straight or it might be scrambled, but that's his kind of mode of threat or dismissal, and it's how you then go about trying to hit him and where you want to hit him and where his field is set.
No, it's really interesting stuff. I was a bit surprised when AJS Patel's your typical sort of you kind of class as more of a traditional red ball.
Hmm.
But he was swinging one into Duckett, getting him LB. It was like, wow, it's trends that transferable skills, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you just, especially when sometimes you might feel the pitch is a bit flat or you're not getting as much out the surface as you need. You need those sort of skills in your armory, especially for someone like Ben Duckett who's so good against spin. You've got to try and throw something out there that is different to what he's expecting.
Absolutely. Um, no, so many things I want to ask. Actually, I was going to ask you about your background first on how you got into the industry. One thing before I forget, Muhammad Ali, he's coming to Notts.
He was
Um,
brilliant in the PSL this year. He's looking better than ever in a sense that he's got his swing away from the right hand on the power play for T20, and he's got very good ball speed in the air, which is great. Yeah, he impressed. He was part of a very good seam attack for Hyderabad Kingsman in the PSL. So yeah, Notts fans should be very excited about that signing.
Fantastic. Well, we've got to thank Paul Franks for that. I think he worked with him and recommended him. We got him for, I think, potentially some of the white ball games, the 50 over games, and then back end of the championship. Although
Yeah.
with Peter Siddle now banned from coming to us, maybe we'll try and get him a bit earlier potentially. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm really interested to hear, and I think a lot of people listening to this will be interested to hear how do you get into the sort of
Yeah.
analytics side of things. I mean, looking at your background, you was it sports science you studied at
Yeah,
university?
it's I'd ultimately say I went to university and I didn't really know this job existed. And I just kind of fell into it in a nice way. I went to Bath University and studied sports and social sciences, which is a bit different to your standard sports course in the sense that I did lots of essays and less lab testing. I did lots of essays around sort of development and sport for development and coaching and teaching. But I ended up getting an internship at Gloucestershire County Cricket Club in 2019. And that was kind of pretty formative in the sense of it grew my connections, and I started to understand what county cricket is and how analysis then functions within that. Um, and then I went on to work with Surrey Academy in 2021, and then I got my first full-time proper role at Northants as the first team analyst in 2022. And the reality is data analysis is ever growing in cricket. And I think coaches and decision makers in cricket are getting better and used to using data. Um, we're still a way off where I think it could go to, for better or for worse. But I think now we're getting to a point where there's lots of money changing hands in sport and there's lots of decisions that need to be made. And I would say if you went, let's say, going back 5 years even, that would have been very much coach led in terms of intuition, gut feel. And now it's very much what do the numbers say before we even get to that gut feel? So the numbers might create your shortlist for your decision making people, and then the gut feel will kind of add the cherry on top. And I think that's a very much a different decision making process to when I started. But yeah, that was a bit of a tangent to how I got into the industry. Yeah, I think I was very lucky. I came at the right time, right place when there were lots of gaps in the market, and I managed to find a full time job, and I've just tried to keep hold of it ever since.
No, I was going to ask you there about how it is used today. So, because you hear stories about franchise owners just saying, "I want a big name. I want to sign this person, that person." Um, but also hear stories of coaches and players who are a bit skeptical of, "I don't really need to know this." How do you work, in that sort of system, and how have you found it from your experiences in terms of how
Yeah,
receptive people are?
I think the former part of what you're saying around owners and things like that, I think is still true and it still runs in the game. And do I disagree with it? I think I can understand it. Ultimately, they want ticket revenues and they perceive, let's say, signing Glenn Maxwell as a big name in cricket. And it's hard to disagree with that. Glenn Maxwell won't make a better T20 cricket team, right? I suppose a lot of the stuff that I do is, I think the stuff that I enjoy the most is working with teams that maybe don't have the biggest budgets. And you're trying to understand, right, what is the value of that player compared with another player? And that was especially rife at Northamptonshire. Like they're not the wealthiest team, and that's okay. But it's right. We've only got this amount of money. How can we use this money the most effectively to create the best T20 team or Red Bull team or whatever? And in that 2023 year that I was my final year there, we ended up getting Matt Bretsky, and Sikandar Raza, two players that were a little bit less than some of the other bigger names that were out there, but their value output was much greater. And I think that's where data and analytics really comes in. It's that money ballification of cricket is definitely coming in the sense that, there's so much cricket going on. We can't expect coaches to watch everything. We also can't expect them to have an understanding of their value and their performance in relation to the market within seconds. So why don't we get someone to help them with that? And that's where I kind of fit in there.
No, that's very interesting. But also, the thing that's interesting also about cricket is it's not just about, say, the best players; it's how they fit together, different skill sets, and
Exactly.
I guess
Yeah.
that's what makes it quite fun as well. In a way, it's not just saying, "Oh, who's in football, who's the best goal scorer." It's
Yeah.
about how does we have this spinner, we want to get one who complements him with different attributes. And now,
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that sort of squad building element to cricket is definitely now coming in across all formats. I think definitely now you look at a lot of Red Bull teams, and they're definitely understanding, right, what does this bowl, instead of just looking at bowling averages and a long list and going, right, well, we'll pick those three. It's very much like, well, this bowler offers much more with the new ball. This bowler offers much more with the older ball. Okay, so what's their skill set? How do we then bring that out? If we're going to pick a spinner, they need to offer something with the bat, or are they going to bowl a team out on the last day? If they're not, what is their role? And I think that's definitely coming into Red Bull. And then T20 wise, like you look at the way that batters are now evolving. You look at someone like Abhishek Sharma in the IPL. He's very much a power play batter. And how do you complement that? And then how do you build a team around that? And the impact. Like there's so many moving parts to what does a good T20 cricket team look like, but also Red Bull team. And that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it all.
Made me think a bit about the England side in the Ashes. They had fast bowlers, speed, but where is the control? Where is the guy who can land it on a spot for that's one of the things I've been quite big on. People talk about the batting and all this, but I said, well, when they won 3-0 in Pakistan, what did they do? They strangled the life out of them with Anderson and Robinson, whatever, and then they couldn't score runs against them. And I think that was we've got lost in the sense of the batting hasn't really changed the approach, but the bowling seems to have got a lot worse. How I kind of read it anyway, but maybe
I think when you say worse, it's interesting. I think the pillars of fast bowling in terms of like consistency, accuracy, pace, and skill in terms of deviation off the pitch or in the air. I think very much this Brendan McCullum, Rob Key team have made the presumption that ball speed matters more than control and accuracy, because I potentially you could argue that they maybe didn't realize how lucky they were to have someone like Broad and Anderson for so many years, and how skillful and how much control they gave them. And they're not slow, but they're not fast. Like they are fast medium in the direct definition. So I would say that lots of teams, I would say like Essex are a great example of slower ball speed through the air, but control. And they are the best team in terms of, we look at metrics like forward defense percentage, because we know that there's a link between Red Bull bowlers, their success, forward defense percentage, and then also bowling average. So looking at bowlers that way, Porter, Cook, they generate the most forward defenses in the county champ, and they have done for such a sustained period. And that's how they create their threat. They're not going to miss. So if they're not going to miss, how do we then work through that? And then they're also very skillful in terms of lateral movement. So it's that the Brendan McCullum team definitely doesn't feel like that's their team, that's their bowling, and that's how they want to bowl. But what comes with that is there might be times in those test matches where you feel like you don't have control, but there might be an amazing ball within 6 overs that's going to generate the wicket that's going to change the game. You can spin it however you want to spin it. It's what you think is going to be effective, and they've gone down the route of, we want ball speed, but we want guys who can also move the ball laterally and hopefully create some amazing moments.
That's interesting. So, and obviously there's only so much you can probably give away with your job, but if McCullum, if Keane, whoever ends up being the selector, were to give you a call and say, look, we're trying to put together a bowling attack this summer, but also one that could, defeat Australia 12 months down the line. That's what we care about, beating Australia. Yeah. What would you be sort of saying for them to be looking at? So you mentioned Porter and Cook. Would you go, well, actually, their skills in England next summer probably won't be enough against Australia? Or do you go, maybe, what are you kind of telling them to maybe look at? Who maybe some of the bowlers you'd be saying to consider? Would you say give Chris Woakes a call and see if he'll come out of retirement? Because quite frankly, I think that would be a good idea. That maybe he would be interested. So just maybe from that side of things, what would you be maybe telling them in terms of what the data suggests and how to put together a varied attack, I suppose?
Yeah, I think ultimately England is defined by forward defences and seam and swing, but also creating pitches that do that. Because there are times, like we've seen in the county champ in the first 4 rounds, when pitches get flat, they get really flat. and there are not bowlers growing on trees that can magically create moments in that sort of overs 50 to 80. Um, and so I think you need that sort of bowler. I think someone like Josh Tongue, like flipping out, he's been absolutely amazing because not only does he get the ball to move laterally, but also from his angle, the way that he bowls into the batter and he's got pace. I think someone like him, he's kind of like the perfect English bowler. Um, I think someone like Sonny Baker, I'd be really keen on looking at, and I wouldn't be surprised if he finds himself in the test squads. You could argue he's a bit raw. You could argue lots of things, but it seems like that's their sort of method of we'd rather get them early into the system and get them into showing them what international cricket's like earlier than later. Um, but I think someone like Sam Cook, I'd like to say plays a part in the Test series this year against New Zealand, and that I think it would be silly for England not to give him another chance after Zimbabwe, and how well he's bowling at the moment in county cricket, and he's still not really hit his straps yet. Um, that sort of Fergus O'Neill sort of type bowler, I think, could still be very effective in England. And I think a lot of my role is giving them suggestions and letting them make their decisions. But as long as they've got the most objective decision possible, is the way that I phrase it. Is you've consulted all the options. It's not just going on gut and feel or what you can remember. It's going, these are all of our options, but this is the decision that we're taking. And I think people would go with that. But it sometimes I think the England setup doesn't help itself in sense of explaining the decisions and explaining how they're going about their process. But yeah, I think I'd like to see Sam Cook, especially Lords against New Zealand. Hopefully, there's a good bit of grass on the wicket. Uh, how can we not use one of the best new ball bowlers in the county game? Because I think that's also a lot of people believe, and I would tend to agree. You've got to dominate the level below before you go into the next stage, right? So that's why people go, well, Haseeb Hamid's been dominating the level below. Why is he not getting called up to England? And I think that's part of the conversation, moving through into that.
That's interesting because I watch Hamid play and I look at his technique and I go, doesn't quite strike me as an international technique.
Yeah,
But that's I'm an amateur in that. I have no idea, but that's just how I. And people are more qualified have said the same, so I don't feel like I'm completely wrong. But I guess that's part of it, isn't it? It's not just going well. Dom Sibley's the top run scorer every year in Division One. It's Dom. What type of deliveries is he facing? What type of deliveries is he likely to get against these attacks? And that's. But also, I suppose, so coming into the your world, you've worked with counties, you've worked with franchises. You mentioned the pitches, so how much of it is aligned thinking? So will the coach or whoever's in charge go, these are the pitches we want to play on? Who would you suggest we look at? Or is it, how does, those sort of conversations work? Do you sort of pick a squad, then think of the pitch, what pitches you'll play on? Or how does all that align?
yeah. So I would say there's a lot of work done on pitches that people don't see. There's a guy at the ECB called Aaron Briggs who's brilliant around that. He's written a PhD on swing. Um, and he does a lot of work around creating what does an archetypal Trent Bridge pitch look like, or what does a Lord's pitch look like? Who are the best bowlers on those wickets? What do we expect from that? What skill sets do we need? And I would say because it's safe. Let's say we're going into that New Zealand series. It's a 3-match series. They'll have their grounds already. They'll know exactly what pitches they'll play on. There'll be a bit of discussion with the groundsman around what sort of pitches they want. But ultimately, groundsmen will want to create a pitch that lasts for 5 days or is a good Test cricket wicket because they have marks to uphold and they get rated on their standalone and on their own. So I think it's a really push and pull with that. We pretty much know what we're going to be playing on. There might be a couple of, well, it might not turn as quickly as we want it to, or it might turn a little bit more. But ultimately, they'll create a squad that they believe will carry them through for the next 3 tests against New Zealand, and they'll go from there. And they can always bring in someone like I think because it's our home series. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a couple of injuries, how quickly someone could get shifted through into that squad and might end up playing.
That's really interesting. And I guess when you're involved in an auction or in that side of things. Again, are you? So I know from I'm not a massive T20 franchise watcher because I think there's so many leagues and you can kind of get as a general spectator, you kind of a bit like, well, you kind of get a bit worn down by it all. But I remember, Chennai used to have, turning pitches and three
Hmm.
great spinners, and that was their, way of going about it. So when you're working for Islamabad, for instance, or another franchise, I know you say you've got more coming up. When you're trying to get players, do you already know kind of what type of players, what pitches you're going to have, all that stuff, or is it very much when you know who you managed to secure, then kind of thinking about what sort of pitches you're going to produce?
Yeah, I think a lot of it. So like Islamabad United are a very successful Pakistan Super League franchise, and they have a distinct way of playing. So they want to be a destructive T20 boundary hitting team, and their recruitment has reflected that. So someone like Alex Hales has played a large part of Islamabad United career. Um, People like Colin Munro, like these guys, they would like to structure their team in a way that they want to bat deep and they want people to go from ball one. And so you also need the pitches to be able to do that. You need flatter wickets, you need consistent bounce. So batters can line it up basically and hit it for as long as as high as they can. Um, what that means is though is that I will then have to build a team with the manager around, right, okay, these are the roles that you want in your 11, and then also we need to backfill that into a squad of let's say 16. Who do we want? I think the way it goes is we want these roles and then we recruit the players into those roles instead of we want the players and then we'll find the roles for them. Um, and it ended up like because of the world factors that were going on at the auction time and everything. We were meant to be playing all around the country. We ended up only playing in Lahore and then Karachi and then back in Lahore. So the pitches were completely different. And our team kind of reflected quite a different Islamabad United team in that sense. So we had less boundary hitters, but we had, you could argue, better batters against spin. But then also our bowling didn't really change. We went through a spin heavy bowling attack. In terms of Imad, we had Shadab Khan, our captain, and then we also had Chris Green. So it changed very quickly and it pretty much changed overnight. And there are some things that you can't control. So you have to accept the squad or the team that you've got in the auction is what you've got. Um, and you can't really replace. There were lots of different rules around that, but it meant that we actually built a squad that was probably better suited for more turning pitches, lower scores. I mean, we bowled a team out for 180 in two different matches, and then we also had a 130. So it was it it I suppose it worked out well. But yeah, in terms of, I would say lots of teams and owners and managers will go and coaches will talk about style of play first, and then they'll move into, right, if that's our style of play, we need the players to do that. And lots of head coaches will be different. But also, I think sometimes head coaches are signed with teams kind of already set up, especially if there's like a heavy retention list, and they'll be like, right, well, this is our team. How am I as a head coach going to get the best out of this team? What sort of messages am I going to be saying? So if you've got a team that maybe is not the most explosive team, they might be saying phrases like "take the game deep." Yeah, they might be saying "assess the pitch." They might be saying, use your nous, work out what your options are with what's in front of you, instead of going, you just got to go out from ball one. Like, and that's how the messages change just from the pitch, the players you've got, and how it's all panned out. Um, and you kind of just got to go with that with your analysis as well. And I think the best analysts then use all the messages that they hear from coaches and in all the discussions that they hear with players, and then bring that into their pre-match prep and when they deliver it to the players. That's the, I would say, the kind of golden circle with that.
Oh, interesting. And well done for mentioning Alex Hales and Colin Munro, two
Yeah.
players Notts fans will know well from.
Yeah.
Munro had a yeah, he was explosive. I think he had one season there. He was explosive. Hales obviously a Notts legend, so no.
Yeah.
And when you're doing, is it an auction for the PSL or is it a draft?
Yeah, so there was a first year of auction, which lended itself to a couple of complications, in the sense of like rules and everything. But yeah, it auction the reason why franchise competitions are going down the auction route is because it's high volatility. It's more exciting. It brings more hype, all of that sort of thing. They want to try and increase viewership. However, what it can do is it can lend itself to less balanced teams compared to a draft, and that means sometimes you get less close games, which doesn't mean it means that there's less jeopardy in the competition and the group if you know that you've got, let's say, two rubbish teams because they haven't done their auction properly or players haven't performed X, Y, Z. Um, so yeah, it seems as though most competitions are leaning towards that auction model. As you've seen, the 100 has gone down that route. Um, some people like it, some people don't. It as from an analyst perspective, it's very much means that there's lots more moving parts. And in that case, this year we got outbid on a couple of players that we had aligned as our main targets, and it meant that we had to pivot and we had to work out right what are the numbers, what's the budget left. So there's far more that I have to do live in that sort of session to help the team manager who's putting his paddle up in the end, and making sure that we number one we don't run out of money, but also we know that we're getting the right players for our style. And I'm almost like the back office. I'm like just keeping everything in check in that sort of situation.
Yeah, no, I was going to say so in two things. One, do you have a first for each role, a number one preference, number two, number three, etc.? And how do you respond to how things are developing on the day? Because nothing will ever go to plan, and I guess it's what do you do in that sort of situation when maybe you don't get your first choice or you spend a bit more than you hope for? How do you then sort of respond to that? So sort of those two sides of things, I suppose.
Exactly. So this year we retained four players, and those four players were Shadab Khan, our captain, who bowls leg spin and bats in the middle order, a death bowler in Salman Urshad, um, and we also direct signed Devon Conway. So like a lot of your spine of your team gets sort of filtered out through that. And then you sort of work out, and we did lots of depth charts around, right, if this is the role, who are the players that are available in the auction, and then who's our top. We did a top 10. We didn't ever get to the 10th player, luckily. But we did a top 10. It just meant that whatever the auction threw at us, we were ready to pivot and then also have the numbers and the budget to go down which route we needed to go down. So an example of that is Islamabad wanted um, Salman Ali Aga, ended up getting outbid on him, which meant we had money left in the bank. And then we went and we put a lot of budget into Mark Chapman, which ended up to be a really good decision because he was brilliant, the New Zealand middle order batter. And that worked out really well. But in terms of like how, from my end, it was right, need to work out the numbers quickly. We've got that budget left. It meant that, and also a lot of teams end up, because it was the first auction, a lot of teams end up using a lot of their money quite quickly. But then there was also lots of other teams that didn't use their money at all, who tried to basically let the auction play out. Because if you don't get sold in the auction in the first round, you'll then come back in the second, and they tried to get lower prices in the second round. So there's lots of moving parts to it. But I think that I was very lucky that we had a team manager in Rayhan who was very calm, which is quite a big thing, and wasn't emotional with his bidding, and was like, "Well, I really want this player. How do we get this players? And we'll put any money towards it." It's like no player is worth infinite amount of money, so we need to find a way around it, basically.
Absolutely. Oh, no, really interesting stuff. Thank you. And how have you found the franchise side compared to the county side of things? I think it's vastly different.
It is. Cricketers are still cricketers. Coaches are still coaches. That's one thing that does stay the same. And a lot of my work hasn't changed. It's just the recruitment and the auction side that adds on to it. In a sense of like culture, it's very much you want to try and create a team culture that's very strong, and it's quite hard to do. It's similar to like an England camp, right? But a lot of these players might already know each other. So you're trying to build relationships and friendships with people, and bonds so that they kind of feel like they're a team and galvanized together. And that's the sort of culture piece. In terms of like the biggest thing that I would say is like the marketing and the promoting of it all. Yes, there's more money in it, right? We understand that there's more money in the franchise game than there is in county cricket, but just the way that sort of the media teams work and the way that they promote the team and the cricket, I think is very different. I think county cricket could learn a lot from it. Like I get it's hard at times because it's such a long season, But I think that's the thing that I've taken away from it. It's they try and make sure that everyone can see that it's the best competition. And we're lucky that cricket is probably the national sport in Pakistan. And so these cricketers are kind of like how I'd explain it. These Pakistani international cricketers are treated like Premier League footballers. And so that brings a whole new sense of hype. Like it is very much a religion in their country. Like everyone, we couldn't really go anywhere, not only for safety reasons, but just like you just couldn't get anywhere. And I think that lends itself to the way that it's marketed and promoted. And I think potentially county cricket could learn a few things.
Interesting. Um, and I suppose in terms of when you work with the counties, like how much are you sort of preparing for each game? How much, data, for instance? So, I don't know who else, but I know the Notts fans, not Surrey tomorrow, huge game.
Yeah.
Got a Surrey side stacked full of international players, bowling attack again with great bowlers. How do you prepare for that? If you were doing that now, I suppose is that the sort of thing you do a bit in your job as well? With intelligent cricket, that sort of
Yeah. So
don't
the
you?
the pre the pre-match element of analytics is kind of like the bedrock of what we do. So, and it's a lot around tactics and plans. So, if you're not and you're going to play Surrey tomorrow, the analyst by now would have sent out a pre-match pack, which would be a data dashboard on the trends and strengths and weaknesses of each batter, 1 to 7, maybe 8. Because Surrey bat quite deep, you probably want to do a pre-match dashboard on Jordan Clark because he might cause some problems. And that will be trends. That might be so. If a lot of bowlers will want to know, am I more effective going around or over? What does the data tell me? And so a lot of that then is a match with their skill. So if they know that they swing the ball into the left-hander and the data tells them it's better to go over the wicket to Rory Burns, they're probably going to go over the wicket, swing the ball back in and trying to hit his pad. Or they might then, and the change-up might be to go across him. And the data will back that up, that is the most effective way, or that is the most common way that Rory Burns gets out. And so that's kind of how it goes. And that will be presented on a WhatsApp chat where players can look at the data dashboard that will be presented in a way that they understand. Then there'll be videos alongside that. So there'll be videos of how Rory Burns has got out most recently, but also maybe last year as well. And then that might form, depending on how each county does it, that might form a meeting where the bowling coach and the bowlers will chat around each batter, going, right, this is our plan. This is how we're going to go about getting Rory Burns out or Dom Sibley. Now, Dom Sibley's an interesting one because he bats on off stump. So he tries to take the channel away from bowlers. So it feels, and he bats on off stump, you could argue, to understand where his off stump is better so he doesn't nick off. But that means that he might be a higher percentage of LBWs. So that might help your Notts bowlers in a sense that, right, I might just keep challenging outside off stump in sense a little bit wider than natural because he's batting already on off stump. And then the change up might be hitting his pads. And so that might come from the data, that might come from the bowlers. Bowlers also like to know how good as a batter is on their short ball. Bowlers also like, depending on the speed of your bowlers, when I was at Warwickshire, they loved the stat around whether it was better to have the keeper up or not. So there'll be data on how many times does a batter get out on if the keeper's up or back. And that might help someone like Ollie Hannon-Dolby or Ethan Bamber bring the keeper up slightly earlier than they would do. And then also around fielding positions, like where do they score their singles? How can I shut off scoring options? If they're very dominant on, let's say, a flick into mid-wicket, can I shut that off earlier to add a bit more pressure and maybe create an opportunity? And that's for red ball stuff. That's how the bowlers will go about it. The batting side, the batters will all look at video. Some of them might do, some of them might not. Like, does Ben Slater need video on Jordan Clark? He's probably faced him out for hours and hours, right? But it's just having that as a safety net to understand what he might come up against. Certain batters like more specific things. They might be like, how is this bowler going to try and get me out? And they'll talk about threats and opportunities. That's quite a common phrase in dressing rooms. They'll be like, well, Dan Morrell's threat is that he swings the ball. He swings the ball away quite a lot to the right-handers. How do I counteract that? or what is my method? And I'd say batting is a bit more personal in that sort of sense. Certain batters will have much more differing methods compared with bowling. And that might be a meeting, that might be a team meeting. And then in terms of for what the coach and the captain might get, they'll get data around sort of the toss information. They might get data around pitches, sort of how much it bounces, or is there do we need to play an extra spinner? You know, is Farhan Ahmed, do we need to get him in the squad, for example, or can we just go with Liam Patterson-White, who also bats? Like he's been brilliant for the last 18 months. I've really enjoyed watching his career kind of flourish a little bit, going from not quite getting to the team to now being kind of like a mainstay red ball spinner for Notts. Um, and and any sort of matchup ideas like, does this bowler get this batter out a lot more than usual? That sort of thing. It's just helping them with the one percenters, because ultimately, I don't know if you saw the article from Simon Armour, the best teams that do the basics more consistently over the 4 days will probably come out the winner. So the Red Bull data stuff, it's all around what are the marginal gains we can make our plans even more effective than what we've already got.
That's right. Yeah, I agree with them too. Sam Hammer's good at talking about. He talked about spinners as well, actually, which is in the past about obviously opportunities and things like that. Actually, putting you completely on the spot here, so please tell me if it's something you can't
Yeah,
answer.
go for it.
Liam Patterson White. Do you have you said I was a bit surprised that you seem to know his journey quite well, which is really interesting. Is he someone that potentially, or even a Ben Slater, these are two players who I could go, could they potentially make the step up to England? Is that anything you maybe have looked at or have any knowledge of, or from what you've seen, or
I think for someone like Liam Patterson White, when I was at Northants, we had him on loan for three games.
awesome?
So I had a chat with him then. I think ultimately to, and I hopefully it's well written about at the moment, is that being a first choice Red Bull spinner that maybe doesn't play T20 cricket, that doesn't bat in the top eight, it's really hard to have a career in county cricket. So, with that being said, if you can find a way to add lots of value to your skill set as a spinner, then you're gonna stay in professional cricket for longer. And Liam Patson White has done that brilliantly. Like his T20 output has been hugely improved. And also he's offering more and more with the bat, hitting hundreds. Like I think he's the archetypal English spinner in a sense that also when we got him on loan to Northants, the data was that he was much more effective in that innings 1 and 2 because he's got control and he allows to be able to. Someone like Don Best is another good example, like understanding, right, what was my role on day one, and it might be going at 2 and over and just holding an end up while you rotate the seamers from the other end. But then I know that when it gets to day 4, how can I create a ball that's going to turn enough to threaten the batter, that's not from wide outside off stump or outside the stumps. It's actually, can you get it to turn on the stumps and create threat? Um, I would say Liam Patson White. I would like to see him in the conversation in the next couple of years. I still believe Liam Dawson is probably my first choice because I think he offers a lot more with the bat at the moment. But I could see if you were planning an England Lions tour, or if you've got your England Lions against South Africa A that's coming up, I would like to see someone like Liam Patson White in that because I think that'd be a really positive decision. I also think that he's now getting to a point now where he's getting on more turning wickets, that he's starting to add a bit more threat, and I think that's really like I'd like to see more variance in wickets in county cricket. I'll be honest, like I'm someone that I don't quite understand why Somerset gets so many demerit points at times, because I think we need to start. We want I would say we would like a county cricket system that enables lots of variance in wickets, because we need to prepare these players for lots of different scenarios. So when they do, let's say one day make the step up to England, they're not shocked if they're playing on a raging Bunsen burner turning wicket when they go to India. Like, why should we have the same sort of wickets everywhere we go in the same country? Like, why don't we have a good mix? But that's just a personal point of view. Going back to Ben Slater, I think it's really hard to break into that England batting unit at the moment, where it's at. So I think you've got to be doing something very distinctly different to what others are doing. And I think the reality is we can all see it. There potentially is a spot opening alongside Ben Duckett. I think Ben Duckett's got enough credit in the bank at the moment from how he's played over the last 18 to 2 years. And someone like Emilio Gay, I think, should be licking his lips a little bit, seeing like I've started really well. You could argue that it's Division Two. Like you could make that statement, but I think England are not at that point where they can start saying that. Like I think England have got backed themselves into a little bit of a corner with the way that they're selecting their batting unit. And I think they've got to start looking at other options, but they also could not. And everyone will just go, well, okay, it is what it is. Like that's their decision. I think someone like Ben Slater, it looks like Jacob Bethel could be wedged in at number 3 for the years to come. And you might get more. I think England are trying to pick a younger player in that sense because they want to try and get longevity out of them, and they perceive getting younger players into the international setup as a better way of doing it and managing, because they don't want to be at a point, I think, potentially they felt burnt or scarred when they were like, well, hang on a minute, Broad and Anderson aren't be going for any longer. One of them is their choice, one of them it wasn't. um, but I think potentially you could argue better international teams manage their development process underneath better. So that's their strategy, is get people in as young as possible if they're good enough, and just try and breed and grow through there.
No, interesting. I think part of it is a cultural thing as well. We see a bloke in their 30s and we go, can't pick him. Australia, they'll just go
Yeah,
turning out. Michael Hussey was a great example. Was he 30 when he made his debut? And they didn't mind. That's when I George Jakes again. I think he was
yeah,
on the other side. I look at Ben Slater and I go, this guy makes 50 almost every game. He very rarely gets out cheaply. He's got
yeah,
a good all-round game. Could he do a job for 2 years? Then in 2 years, you could pick someone else. Now, that's just what I was thinking. Emilio, again, he got runs last year in Division 1 to be fair to him as well.
yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. I think maybe those sorts of decision-making processes could be a bit more public. Would that help accountability and scrutiny? I don't know. I would like to see it more, but I don't know whether people would be keen on that. I think that's just a society thing at the moment, isn't it?
possibly. You mentioned Liam as well. I mean, great. I mean, yeah, he was up against Ajaz Patel in his last game. You mentioned. So he and I, I'm probably coming from a slightly biased point of view, and also I think the match situation helps spinners. So Notts were on top from pretty much
Yeah,
4-1, so that does help him a lot. But his figures, first innings, we were bowler down for most of it. He's gone 22 overs, 1 for 52, economy of 2.36. Second innings, 5 for 53, economy of 1.47. And it's probably as good as I've seen him bowl, actually. The pitch was starting to turn. And some of those wickets were classic left arm spinners wickets, one
yeah,
through the gate, and a caught, off the leading edge at slip, LBW straight on. And those sort of, he kind of did everything there. So, yeah. And he was in the England lines in that aborted trip to the UAE where I think all the
hmm
bombs were going off and he came back. So, yeah, it's interesting. We'll see. Really comes into conversation. I think part of the problem there as well is it's narrative. James Coles is the exciting new left arm spinner who bats.
yeah.
He's not taking many wickets, but he's the name on everyone's lips. I guess it's partly that as well.
It's amazing how recency bias changes everyone's perception around players and performance, and I think that's a big takeaway. Is that's again part of my role, is to provide that objectivity, to try and move away from recency bias a lot of the time and be a bit more holistic and a bit more objective, so that you're making the right decision as a team.
Absolutely. Well, I'm conscious of had you for so much time.
That's all
I'll
right.
try and very quickly get through my final list of
Go
questions.
for it.
First of all, during a game, how much input will you be having, I suppose?
Yeah. So during a game of cricket, just so everyone's clear, the analyst will be live coding the game. And that means we have something like 8 to 10 data points. So an analyst will be clicking where they think the ball would land on the pitch, or where it has landed on the pitch. where it's going to pass the stumps, the wagon wheel, the batter shot type, the foot movement of the batter, the delivery type, and then any events in the ball. So if they appeal, for example, and then that will be associated with the video clip. So that's what the analyst is doing, or someone is doing during the game. So when you click onto MV Play, uh, to click on a video clip to see someone getting out, that clip will be generated from the analyst cameras, and the analyst clicking start ball clip to record and then end ball clip. So that all happens. And so a lot of analysts try and offload that work to someone else and then speak to the coaches while the game is going on around what could be happening or what is the data to support their assertions around the game. So in red ball cricket, there's usually lots of time to talk about the game, which is great. So for example, during the game, you might be pulling out certain key points around how we've bowled to a certain batter or how a batter's played. And so like I'll have a little chart that will show how bowlers have performed in that session. And let's say I'll send that to the bowling coach because it'll be live updating as the game's going on. I'll send that to a bowling coach at the start of lunch. Everyone has their lunch, everyone just takes a breath, and then 10 minutes before they go back out for the second session, that's when the bowling coach can do his magic in the sense of, look, I thought you might have been a bit short. This is the data to support that. Have a think about how you can create a bit more threat by bowling a little bit fuller. The pitch might be doing this as well. So we get live data from the pitch if we can. So it might be the pitch is performing. This is how we're seeing the deviation or swing in the air. And that might relate back to the bowler's skill. Can we try and look at using that to advantage? And that's sort of if you're bowling in the first day. If you're batting in that first morning, for example, I will then give information around how the pitch is performing, how bowlers are bowling, what has been their effectiveness. And like coaches will have their own thoughts, they'll watch every ball. Like they'll have their own understanding, but it's whether it matches up to the data. If it challenges it, why does it challenge it? Where is the kind of middle ground? Because I think that's the best bit around my work is a sense of getting there's lots of stuff that we don't take data for. So how can we match it up together with what the coaches are seeing to create probably the right answer or the most informed answer for the players to then execute that on the pitch. And that's sort of what happens in a red ball game. In a T20 game or a one-day game, it'll be sort of expected scores or again similar like how the pitch has been playing or how are we going to rotate our bowlers? Like what's the best matchup? Again, you might send these matchups 2 or 3 days in advance. We can't expect coaches to just remember them off the top of their head. So we have to have this information ready to be able to use. Or it might be in a T20 game, a new batter's come in and bowlers just want a little checkup on what is our plan to that batter. And it might be getting inside or outside of their swing. If it means that they bowl the best ball possible from ball one instead of 2 or 3 balls in when they might have hit a couple of boundaries, that's the sort of marginal gain that we're trying to win there in a short form game.
Two very final questions. One from Richard. I don't think he'll be able to join us today.
That's right.
His question was on wicket keeping and how you kind of use statistics for that. As for fielding in general, I guess it might be if we're going to broaden it. And then also, finally, what change would you like to see going forward?
Yeah, so wicket keeping and fielding is kind of a bit of an untapped market, I suppose, in cricket and data analytics. We're slowly getting to a point where we're getting at least fielding positions placed for most balls now. Like that's the next step, and that matters a lot in a sense of short form cricket in terms of bowling plans, because we do so much work on bowling plans and how to get batter out and execution, but we never really reflect that deeply on like, okay, if this was your field and you bowled this ball, was this poor execution or was this poor planning? We can accept poor execution because that's sport, that's professional sport. Sometimes we don't perform, but what we can't excuse is poor planning. So that's where I suppose the fielding is sort of taking the next step in terms of at least getting fielding placing. In terms of like catch percentages and accuracy, because it's still human coding, there's always going to be that level of like uncertainty around it. And we can look at that whether it's positive or negative for the game. Ultimately, we're trying to take the data as best we can as analysts. It's an interesting one. I think there was a stat when Johnny Bairstow was in the England team. and then Ben Folks was sort of still coming, kind of trying to get in his in. There was something like Johnny Bairstow had a better catch percentage than Ben Folks, but of course everyone can see that Ben Folks is just a bit of a better keeper. That's not a difficult assumption to make, or assertion, should I say? But it's because of the way the data was taken. It's because Ben Folks started going for more balls and actually trying to take more catches, so his catch percentage was lower. So it's like 6 of one, half dozen the other. So in terms of that keeping sort of standpoint, we don't take much data on keeping, and I think that's where the game has to go a little bit quicker, if I'm being honest, around fielding, and move a bit away from batting and bowling, because a lot of coaches and players will speak about how important fielding is in the dressing room, yet we don't take much data on it. The best sort of work that I've done around fielding is with the England women's fielding coach Nick Wilton, who I worked with in the 100 last year, and he coded his own all the players' fielding. And so what I do with that information is then show him, right, who is the best fielder. He had his own little scoring system. He knew exactly how it was working. It was brilliant, and it just meant that we could actually go into games going, well, we know that this fielder is better in this position compared to this position, and that allowed us to have a chat with the captain around, well, if we need our best fielders in the best position, so we might need to sort of change up because it's quite habitual where fielders will want to field and sort of where they go. So yeah, that's the sort of stuff that I've really enjoyed doing with Nick, in the sense that it was just really easy. He coded it himself. He knew his scoring system. It was all in his mind. And then I just helped him with sort of using the data and how we can make better judgments and decisions. In terms of where I'd like the game to go, I really would like to see less of what seems to unfortunately be happening, maybe a little of a 100 counties versus non-100 counties divide in terms of money and resources. So the likes of Leicestershire's and Durham's, who don't have 100 teams, I want to see them in the top division, because I think it's a massive little bit like we can still perform even though we don't have the biggest budgets. I'd also like to see a bit. I know people like to say, "Oh, the 100 isn't great because it's what the blast should have been." I sort of agree, but what I'd like to see is counties taking a bit more of a holistic approach in the sense of their marketing and promoting, and instead of just thinking like cricket is a game that everyone loves and if we build it, they will come. Can we do a bit more as a game to promote it, and a bit more? Actually, we might need to encourage more people to come, because otherwise our counties are going to start dwindling in sort of viewerships and people coming in like this. It's interesting, that whole live stream debate, when Lancs have obviously now announced that they're going to start charging people to view their live stream. I think that's a really good bit of discourse that's happening in the game. But then what I'd like to see is the ECB then move to going, okay, well, we clearly see there's a cost to creating these live streams on YouTube. It's great that they're free. Like, that's a brilliant bit of marketing, and it's getting more people into the game. If we know that it's becoming too much of a burden or cost for counties, why don't we create a standardized live stream pass that you pay for a year that everyone get access into? That's a better product, better product for fans than, well, if I have to watch Lancs, I have to pay 20 quid, but everyone else I get for free. Like, that there's just no joining up thinking with that. We can argue the toss whether it's going to increase or decrease viewing figures. From what happened at Leicestershire and Kent, it decreased viewing figures, but that's the county's choice. That's their business decision. They see lots of money being spent on camera equipment and live streaming, but they're not getting anything back for it. Yeah, we can argue the toss around that, but yeah, that's where I think modernization is a buzzword of using it, but I just think there could be much more the counties could be doing on their budgets to increase the chance of more people coming to their games, because that's what we need.
Well, you're speaking the language I speak, and so I'd like to see more in terms of commentary analysis, like speed guns popping up on screens, and graphics, scoring shot statistics. I like to see some sort of technology in terms of, getting the right decisions. I mean, you watch rugby, you watch football, you watch tennis, any sport. The top level and the one just below, they've got the same rules and things in. Our county championship, you're kind of going on hoping the umpires have a good game. Whereas you look at Zach Crawley, he's getting stinking decisions.
Yeah. I'll just chat briefly on that. Yeah. So the ball tracking element, we're trying to get there as a game. So you might have noticed umpires wearing GoPros for the last couple of years. They've now got phones. That's just the technology evolving. This technology is called iHawk, and it's trying to get ball tracking data into county cricket. It's trying to be a cheaper version than full Hawkeye because no domestic league has got that yet. In the sense of like, it's not in the Ranji Trophy in India, it's not in the Sheffield Shield. Hawkeye for every domestic game of cricket is a lot of money, and that's okay. So we're trying to find a cost-effective solution. It is yet to be ready for DRS in cricket in the county game, and unfortunately, it looks like it's going to be quite a long way off. But that it's pushing the boundaries in a sense that you might have seen also other tracking systems where it's going off the stationary camera that the live stream is running off. So that's called Vision AI from NB Play. Like lots more companies are starting to understand the want and need for it because for a data perspective, the quality of data we get, if we know how much the ball is bouncing, or we know exactly where every ball is passing instead of just a human coding it, it's going to revolutionize the data set. So the sell and the pull is there. There's also the golfing technology TrackMan is also starting to develop potentially ball tracking solutions. The speed radars that you're seeing is the same technology that they use for cars for speeding. So they're obviously wrong, but they cost around four and a bit grand for counties. But like coaches are starting to notice when they don't have speed data. So like speed data is really important, not only for fast bowling, but also for spinners in a sense of like, okay, how much turn are you getting bowling at that speed? Like we need the actual data and the numbers to understand what speed you're bowling because anyone can put their finger in the air and trying to go, well, that looks about 80. Like that's not the point. That's not high performance sport. So yeah, we're slowly getting there. And again, that comes with the sort of modernization and the growing sense of okay, we need money for these things, but there is now money flooding into the game with the hundreds selling up. Like, could we spend that on things that could make a real difference to the performance of the team instead of maybe, I don't know, a new stand? So that's the sort of conversations that you might have in counties around that sort of money budgetary pot.
I was thinking to have something for even just Division One for county championship games. What is there? 14 rounds of five. Whatever it is that how many games that would be. Is a cheaper version than obviously rolling out everything, but it's a conversation, as you say, I'm sure it's been having elsewhere. I think it'd be great for the viewers. I think it'd be great for selection. I think it's the sort of thing the county game needs. Because as much as I love the streams, they can be very basic, and I just worry that we don't. People tuning in who aren't massive cricket fans, I don't think they're going to be like, "Oh, this is great."
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's the balance that CEOs of counties are trying to make because they understand the want and the need for a good live stream, but they also understand the want and the need for putting money in other places. Like it's a difficult one. Um, I think I'd like to maybe see the ECB wade in a little bit and create like a standard. This is what we expect from a live stream. I don't know if they'll do that. That seems a bit too inventive for the ECB. So we just have to be a bit careful. Like so I'd like to think that maybe, I don't know, a media company starts taking on a bit more responsibility and kind of getting in there because if you get better live streams, you get better social media clips, you grow the game a bit more. Like there is a golden circle to this. So yeah.
Absolutely. So and then get rid of the adverts when someone's about to bowl. Watching Notts Leicestershire last week, someone's running to bowl, and then YouTube advert for a minute pops up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Frustrating than that. So
Yeah.
brilliant. Look, you've given an hour of your time. Blimey, this has flown by. This has been really interesting. I can't thank you enough.
No problem.
So this is going to sound a bit weird, but obviously by the time people listen to this, our episode with Duncan Hamilton, the sports author, will be live previously. So we're putting that one out because I don't know if you know him, but he covered Nottingham Forest.
Oh, cool.
Very, very interesting book, and then did a lot of cricket books. So as he was there during the glory days when we were Kings of Europe, the fact that we were in the Europa League semi-final, second leg tonight, it seems appropriate to get that one out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Memories. So people listen to this will already know how Forest have got on. So please listen to that one if you haven't heard that one yet. James, thank you so much for your time.
Problem.
It's been really interesting. And just say to everyone again, where you work and again, the company you're working with at the minute, and who you're working with, I suppose, in terms of other teams.
Yeah, so I'm at Islamabad United, just finished that, and then I'll be off to the MLC with Seattle Orcas in June. And then I get to chill for a bit, spend a bit more time at home, and then yeah, we'll just see where the next contracts we can get.
There you go. So if you're a franchise owner listening to this, or you're a county CEO and you want more information, then you know where to go. Thank you again. Thank you to everyone who's listened, and we'll be back again with another very interesting episode coming soon.